every year at Christmas time, or Hanukkah time, or Kwanzaa time, holiday time, let's just go with holiday time, all of the toy companies compete to be the toy company that makes that product everyone's going to want. And guess who that toy company is now? Yeah, I bet you weren't going to say Elmer's. Was that going to be the toy you thought of, or rather the company that makes the #1 toy kids are asking for? Well, that's because Elmer's glue is pretty much the main ingredient used to make slime. And if you have kids, or you've been around kids, or you haven't been living in a hole for the last year, well, wait, actually this is 2020. A lot of us have been living in a hole. Either way, kids and slime is a huge fad with toys right now. And being able to make your own slime has become the way kids are now playing with it. It is no longer packaged and sold as slime, but rather you can go out and you can buy kits to make slime. And there's not just one company doing this. Lots of companies are coming up with different sets, and they're including everything from glitter to beads to soap, all sorts of different ingredients you can add to your slime to make it colorful or shiny or sticky or crunchy. There's really no limit to it. And as the world's #1 maker of glue, Elmer's was smart enough to jump on the bandwagon pretty early and start coming out with their own kits for kids, including their trademark glue. And that's pretty much why Elmer's is the company making the #1 toy right now. Man, I really should have bought Elmer's stock a few years ago. Who could have ever predicted that, right? Well, what is it with slime? And where did it all start? Well, it started with Flubber. That's right, like the movie. Flubber, it was a tie-in. You may have heard of it. It came out a couple times. They remade it. This was a toy that came out in the 1960s, and it was basically the precursor of today's slime. The problem with it, and the reason that it didn't last was, well, to be literal, it burned children's hands because of the chemicals and was quickly taken off the market. And looked like that was the end of compound play forever. Fast forward 10 years later, and in the later half of the 1970s, Mattel came out with a new compound that they called slime. The word slime had never been used on a toy before. And it wasn't too complicated of a compound. They were able to create it in their, magical laboratories. And to say it became a hit is an understatement. When slime first hit in the trademark green container, it hit big time. Kids loved it. Mattel had eliminated the chemicals that left the burn marks on kids' hands, and now it was safe to play with. Heck, it was technically even safe to eat because it was made with very, well, I don't want to say nutritious ingredients, but it included things like guar gum, which could easily be digested and would not even give you a stomachache. I mean, obviously, it didn't taste very good. Guar gum is also a polysaccharide, is the technical term and the chemical formula for it. And by combining this with off-the-shelf borax, well, you basically had slime, and a compound that Mattel was able to not only trademark as a formula, but as a name as well. And that little green trash can container that they put out, containing a few ounces of slime, was a huge hit for them. In fact, it was so big that they had to come up with new play patterns for slime besides just the buying it in a green trash can container. While it was fun to play with, mold, shake, squirm, and squeeze through your fingers, probably the original fidget toy, I suppose one could say, Mattel toy makers were clever enough to find other ways of playing with it, and they exploited it to the max. Everything from board games to worm creation to just buying slime compound in its original form became a huge leader in Mattel's catalog the following year. Everyone wanted to play with slime, and finding new ways to play with it, such as in a board game where a slime monster hovers aboard your characters, well, this idea was going to come back. Well, it started with just some PVC non-articulated figures getting an alien to more or less barf on them. This idea had a lot of merit. And while slime sales were on the rise in the late 70s, and it looked like there was going to be no end to this trend, it was going to last forever, right? Slime was here to stay, and then it wasn't. You see, a small independent film came out that, well, for better or worse, and I actually think better, changed the toy industry forever. Star Wars was it. It changed everything. While there were movie-related toys and licensed toys prior to Star Wars, the way you had an interaction between figures and vehicles, and the fact that the figures were so aspirational because of the hero's journey of the story, well, it changed play forever, and it really inspired so many children, which meant they were no longer interested in things like slime. So, the slime tombstone was erected. Star Wars was the new king of the Isle, and Star Wars didn't involve slime. I mean, I guess except for, like, Gamorrean guard spit or something like that, but that wasn't until Return of the Jedi. Well, Mattel was not going to let a great idea go forever. And as Star Wars started to set after Return of the Jedi came out and sort of had its time in the limelight, a new brand came along that captured the hearts and minds of children, and it was known as Masters of the Universe. You may have heard of it. I've done one or two videos on this channel about it. I was also blessed enough to be the brand manager for the Classics line, which was a nostalgia-based line because, well, it was playing up the fact that as kids, we all loved this toy line. And it really did replace Star Wars at retail. As its popularity went down, Masters of the Universe went up. And in 1985, a new set of villains was introduced, the Evil Horde, that was going to expand the line. And another way to do that was to introduce a new mini playset for the Horde, and it was this toy here, otherwise known as the Slime Pit. You've probably also heard of it, but you may not have known how influential this toy was. A quick review of how it worked: you put slime into the top, you dip the head down, you put the claw up to keep the character trapped, and slime poured down on your action figure. But it wasn't just that slime poured down on your figure, and it wasn't just that the slime was now Evil Horde slime, but this play pattern, which did replicate the play pattern from the Alien game from the 1970s, had an added feature. It wasn't just that you were now covering your figures with slime, the way the Alien game did, but the slime was infused with actual parts of the play pattern in the fact that the slime changed characters from being loyal to Skeletor or He-Man into mindless zombies of the Horde, meaning the slime was responsible for actually affecting characters during play. It was no longer just an experience of watching the slime fall down, the way it was in the 1970s in that vomiting Alien board game, but now, when a character was covered in slime, they would emerge from the slime pit loyal to Hordak, the master of the Evil Horde. And you had essentially created brainwashing slime. And that element right there is what differentiated the slime pit from all previous slime play. In fact, brainwashing slime was so incredibly popular that the gruesome goop that turns warriors into slime monsters was sold open stock as its own toy. You could just buy the slime, or replace the slime that came with your pit. And memories of playing with this toy lasted for years, so much so that it showed up in quite a few other Mattel toy lines, including the 2000X Masters of the Universe relaunch, and the early 2000s Harry Potter line, which called it the Slime Chamber, kind of like the Chamber of Secrets, but in this case, the secrets are replaced by slime. It even made a guest cameo appearance in the Batman Ra's al Ghul Imagine-X set, which, yeah, definitely looks a lot like the vintage slime pit. So the fact that slime was now responsible for actually affecting the personality of characters and turning them into slime zombies changed everything. And this stuck around. This really affected not only kids, but as they grew up and became toy collectors, the memories of He-Man becoming an evil slime zombie and taking on this form, well, it took on a life of its own. In fact, it actually wound up being the basis for several Masters of the Universe action figures. He-Man showed up in quite a few lines in green iridescent plastic, and as well as fan customs, showing what an action figure of Slime Pit He-Man would look like. And, of course, Classics actually did do a slime He-Man for PowerCon. This was the very last Masters of the Universe Classics action figure Mattel ever made, or at least at the point of this video being recorded. Maybe it'll come back one day. Who knows? But I definitely had a lot of affinity for this figure. While I was no longer at Mattel when it was made, this was part of the original lineup. He was always on the spreadsheets, and I was so glad when he made the line because I always wanted this figure as a kid, and it happened. One other thing to talk about the slime pit was the negative aspect was, well, if the slime got on your carpet, that kind of turned out to be an issue. While getting it out of the carpet isn't exactly the easiest thing, it can be done. And, you know, moms and dads of the 1980s were tasked with removing quite a few slime accidents. What a lot of parents didn't know, and what I didn't know until I was at Mattel, was that Mattel actually had a policy of completely replacing people's carpets if they had a slime spill. All you had to do was call Mattel, and they would literally replace your entire carpet at no cost. And boy, do I wish I knew this, because I was one of those kids that spilled slime on my carpet. Actually, I want to go on the record and say I didn't do it. It was either my sister or one of my friends, because I was so careful with that slime. And I was warned by my parents that if I got slime on the carpet, I was going to have the slime pit taken away. So I was super careful. But somehow slime did get on our carpet, and my parents didn't know about the ways to remove it like they have today. You can go on YouTube and look up a million ways to get slime out of carpet. And they definitely didn't know about the Mattel policy of replacing carpet. And that's the story of how my parents took away my slime pit toy. This is one of my saddest memories as a kid, especially because I knew I didn't get the slime on the carpet. I was warned that if that happened, my slime pit would be taken away, and I was so careful to not let this happen. And when it did happen, albeit with my sister or one of my friends or one of her friends, oh, yeah, that was probably one of the saddest moments of my childhood, and I wonder if it affected me and what my interests would be growing up. Could that have been a traumatic moment that changed my life forever? Well, back to Mattel. So while Mattel had the secret formula for slime, or at least the not that secret formula of combining grow gum with borax, it wasn't exactly the only way to skin a cat. Sorry, Kiki. I mean, the only way to make slime. There is recipe after recipe after recipe, especially today. I mean, you can just look on Google or YouTube, and there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of recipes for making slime-type substances of different consistencies. But what Mattel did have was the copyright to the name slime. So while there were other ways of forming what are called compounds, that's the technical word for slime, you couldn't call it slime. So other companies had to resort to other tactics. So in the Real Ghostbusters line, well, slime, instead of being a Mattel product, under Kenner, became ectoplasm, which also was used in the movie. And with the Playmates Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles line, instead of calling it slime, because Mattel owned the copyright to that, they simply called it mutagen, or ooze became the label on package in order to sell it to kids and moms, because, you know, who doesn't want to play with ooze? The liquidating stuff that turned people into cool turtles, or little turtles into Ninja Turtles. And hey, that's actually probably what we have to thank for the second Ninja Turtle movie. It's called Secret of the Ooze, and if Mattel hadn't owned the copyright to slime, maybe it would have been called The Secret of the Slime. So hey, there you go. Look at how toy copyrights can affect so much in pop culture. Now, while the years passed, the name slime did become in public domain. It was no longer a copyright to Mattel, and I think a big part of that was also Nickelodeon's use of that. It's a little hard to retain the copyright to something that becomes so universally used. And Nickelodeon even now puts out slime by the jugful, and you can buy it. You can buy Nickelodeon sets to make your own slime, and it's become part of the Nickelodeon brand and Nickelodeon sort of DNA. And when you're looking at holiday gifts, like we said at the very beginning of this video, it is amazing to think that slime is now at the top of the Christmas wish list for so many kids. And with Star Wars ending the slime craze of the 70s, We really have one toy to thank for bringing slime back and making it a huge part of kids' lives. It's great to see kids playing with slime again. And honestly, if we hadn't had this toy from the 1980s, the Mattel Horde Slime Pit, the slime craze of today probably wouldn't exist. And I probably wouldn't have had it taken away from me and, totally traumatized my childhood. Alright, I love slime. If you love slime too, subscribe, give this video a like. It lets YouTube know to share this with other people, and that's what this channel's all about, sharing toy love. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.